Hey guys, Boardnell back with you. On this video I'm going to be talking about Ozark Season 1 Episode 2. It is called Blue Cat, so full spoilers from the start of this review in case you've never seen this show before or this episode. Just a warning there. And obviously, following the setup of the first episode, the family are now in the Ozarks. They're in their new location, and this episode sort of jumps about a fair bit. Although there's a couple of main focuses, but the first thing which Marty tries to do is he needs to try and find local businesses to try and launder money, and that becomes a whole thing throughout the episode, for most of the episode, where he starts bouncing about different businesses and keeps getting rejection, mostly because they cotton on to what he's trying to do. The most amusing scene from those scenes anyway, I think, is when he goes to this strip joint and he's talking to like the manager about going into business together, and it's a twist on things. I think it's mostly just because this is a backwater town, this is the Ozarks, and they do things a bit differently, but there seems to be a niche sort of thing behind this strip club where they actually employ pregnant or big women. I'll say I wasn't sure if the woman on stage was meant to be pregnant or meant to be big, but when they start talking, there's this thing with the manager where he actually goes in for that stuff, and that's what his business is based on. So he actually doesn't go for glamorous looking type girls. He goes for the big girls, and that's how he gets his business. So Marty's almost trying to talk him into doing the opposite. Hey, we could actually go with this, and he's laying things out, and it's just a funny conversation because you've got this backdrop of the girl on stage, and at the same time Marty's kind of trying to play the smooth sort of business guy, trying to talk this guy into a business project. And what's funny about the scene is Marty trying to talk the place up like it could be sophisticated and all that, and it's at one point where the guy says titty bar sort of thing when Marty is dancing around the names, and that was really funny actually, just the delivery of that. And Jason Bateman's reaction is sort of uncomfortable expressions in return, and obviously things don't work out there, but you sort of get the feeling they're going to return to this place and that there might be more from the bar sort of owner. But again, there's some pretty solid storytelling in this episode, because at one point he goes to this place called the Blue Cat of the title, and he tries to give the pitch to the woman there, who seems a really grounded, straightforward, sort of honest sort of person. I've seen the actress in something else, I can't think what else, but I think maybe a horror movie, but I can't quite think what horror movie. And what sort of happens here is that she sees what he's trying to do. She sees that he's trying to run a scam, trying to launder money, which in the long run would lead to her having to owe two people money sort of thing, getting in debt and owing double the money, because then also owing payments to him. So she sort of calls a spade and tells him where he can go. But what then happens is then the Bateman character finds an inn later on, and that's because his son Jonah has actually struck up a friendship with this handicapped kid called Tuck, who also works at this place. So he sort of uses that as like a way in. So this is where they sort of circle back round to it later, because he goes into the bar later, and this is at the point where he's almost like given up on finding a business. So Tuck is working at the time, and a couple of like guys come in, and one of them starts like mocking him because of his disability and calls him brain dead and stuff like that. And Marty like sticks up for him at first, and he seems to be like honestly doing it. But then what happens is because he just tells the guy, you don't talk to him that way. But then he stops, and the manager walks in, the person he was talking to earlier, and as he sees her walk in, he sees this as an opportunity to like put on a show for her. So he then, continues his sort of tirade against the guy, and it becomes a whole like set to, and he like stands up to the guy, and he takes like a punch for it, because he's like, you should apologise to Tuck right now, and he takes a punch. And obviously part of his whole sales pitch is that he believes in like small local businesses, that kind of thing. And this obviously is just for show to like impress the manager, and maybe make her change her mind about going into business with him. So, but it's solid storytelling, because obviously, his son has made this friend, and it's sort of something which then gives him an opening later on, having seemingly struck out. And it actually gets to the point in this episode where Marty's considering suicide at one point, and the main reason he considers suicide is because he just comes to this conclusion, then it's like best for his family. Then he's sort of getting desperate and starting to see his like future, and just thinks this is maybe the best way forward, the best way out for his family. Then he can commit suicide, and they can like pocket the money, like, but he kind of chickens out of it, or doesn't go through with it. And it's because he has a conversation with his like financial manager, and hypothetically, like, the manager puts to him, then it may not be as straightforward as he's thinking. Then there may be complications, especially if it gets out about some of the circumstances, and so it may be then they might not see it as straightforward as, that you can have the cash to his family. And once again, that ties into like the themes of the show, to do with like the sort of flawed system of like capitalism and what have you, and how things don't always run smoothly, even when they should. So that's why he changes his mind. The other big plot in the episode is that we get introduced to like this family, and the sister of the family, they're like a trailer park style family, and the sister is Ruth, who's played by Julia Garner, who I know is a major character in this show, and I've seen her in other stuff. I've seen her like she has a supporting role in The American. She was really good in that. She's in the film Grandma. She's in something now, I can't think what it is, but the sort of storyline in this episode that introduces them is that her and her brother are working at the motel where Marty's family are staying while they look for a permanent place. And so Charlotte, the daughter, starts talking to like the brother, and is kind of persuaded to like go with him, like says he's got a speedboat, and so they go on a speedboat together. And one thing I think this episode shows is that maybe Charlotte is the more, I think, rebellious one, just because she's at that sort of pre-teen age, so she's kind of like fuck it, and especially since her life has been so uprooted, whereas I think Jonah is still like young enough where he's maybe a bit more like wet behind the ears, a bit more naive, and he does have this like loyalty to his dad, which we see in this episode. So Charlotte is like talked into going on a speedboat with this kid, which it turns out isn't his, like he stole it because they're a poor family. They can't afford a speedboat. But the way the plan sort of hatches is then, while she's like taken out of the picture, and it sort of just, takes that sort of thing away, and then I say Julia, but Ruth gets into the hotel room, and she actually takes like some of the 8 million, which obviously Marty is there to launder. So she actually steals it. And another thing about the storyline up to this point is then the two kids don't know why they're actually in Ozark. They've been given like a cover story and about like a business prospect, that sort of thing. It's actually later in the episode they find out, because Wendy decides to tell them, and she's like, what the hell, you deserve to know the truth. But it's like later on in the episode, at this point they don't actually know. And what's sort of funny about that from like a dramatic standpoint is then they're kind of like creeping around this sort of knowledge about this information, and at first they're just telling the kids to just stay out of the hotel room and like just watch the stuff, but they obviously don't know they've got like this $8 million. So like later on, when Marty starts looking around to make sure nothing's been stolen, and he's obviously checking on the money, Wendy then takes the son Jonah outside, because again they don't want it revealed that they've got this money stashed away. So they find out about the money, and there's this whole incident with Charlotte and the kid on the speedboat where the police come after them, and he basically throws her overboard, so throws her in the path and sort of escapes. And we get like an insight into some of like the local politics in the next scene, because Wendy and Marty go to like the police sort of station and is sort of telling, obviously they've been called in because Charlotte's been arrested, and is kind of like, Marty's very savvy and like calls it out for what it is, because he sort of says, well, what's happening here is, rather than scan the whole area, rather than like search the whole sea for and do your job to actually find someone who's like more culpable than our daughter, it's just much easier for you just to charge someone that you've come across, like, and rather than actually go out and find the real culprits. And I think there's this whole thing about the family that they're into a lot of crime, and they're a bit of a rough family, and I think in the end, because Marty does some sort of talking, some smooth talking, and kind of turns the heat up a little bit, in the end they do like sort of start tracking them, like, but it's a good scene. Again, it's nicely played, but what we build to in the episode is that Marty has to go and try and get the money, and he actually puts his life on the line because they're all there in like a group and they've got guns, and he obviously so desperate to get the money back, he actually tracks them down and walks in on them and says and what happens then, and this I think again has some similarities to the first episode, where there's this thing about Marty where he's sort of like a con artist, where everything he's doing is very self-serving, and I think he always has a way of twisting things, but at the same time, a lot of time he is telling the truth. It's just that he's using it for very selfish purposes. Or I think a lot of times it will be the truth as he sees it. So in this scene, he's painting a picture to this family, and he says, this is not my money. This is this drug cartel leader's money, and it's quite a good scene in the sense of when he mentions the name and they have no idea who he is, and then like the youngest one of the family, I think, like Googles it and they see, and then starts passing it around. So the way it sort of like spirals and they all take note slowly is quite a good scene. So he starts saying, what will happen in the long run is that they'll come looking for their money if they don't hear from me, and if I'm still alive, I'm going to be forced to point them in your direction, and they will come after you and probably kill you one by one, that sort of thing. And there's all this, and in the end, what he sort of talks them into like giving him the money back, but it's obviously indicated in the scene that this will not be the last they'll see of him. And what's crucial about the scene is that it's Ruth who's at the front of, when they're talking to Marty, Ruth's actually at the front of the family, and she actually speaks up, and it's almost like she takes like a leading position in the family. And there's certain tactics she uses like the whole father's thing, and because when she's trying to get her own way and saying we should do things this way, she uses the father of the family saying, he wouldn't like this, and he would back me up and stuff. But it's just a clever little twist on thing. Then it's like this like 19-year-old girl who is like, she's almost like the dominant one of the family. She's got the guts, she's got the savvy and the smarts, and she's like the one almost giving orders. But so it's quite the scene back and forth, and as Marty is leaving at the end of the scene, she like comes up to him and like says, something tells me then I think we both know that them things are better off if you were dead, and I think that's what almost motivates him to like nearly commit suicide near the end of the episode. So there's that stuff going on as well. It's like a good indication of her character. So obviously by the end of the episode, Marty has done his little like thing to get the blue car as like his business, or the blue cat I should say. The feds are looking for him as well because they find his former business partner dead and are obviously a little suspicious. Then they've suddenly uprooted to another part of the country, so that's going to become quite an enticing plot, the feds coming after Marty and the family. So, and that's something which has got potential. And the other thing with Wendy in this episode, is, and she's the one tasked with finding a house for them, which she does, but it's sort of an awkward deal, and it's not the greatest place, but the whole like bugbear with it mostly is then you have this character, this old guy who they have to share the house with. Like, he just lives in the basement, but they essentially would be sharing it with him. And he's he's a single guy, he's elderly, he's like supposed to be like in his early 80s, and he's got cancer and is dying. And it's again something about this show, the tone of it, where it is like very blunt, and he's almost like just very old fashioned. I think like one of these characters that you would get in like these sort of southern backwater type towns, where he is very like behind the times and has a very like old fashioned like attitude when it comes to like females or to like families, and he sort of expresses that. And one thing he does say is to do with like he has like a very demeaning like comment about Wendy's like teenage daughter and her having periods, and how he feels like how that puts him off, sort of thing. And again, I think it just comes back to like tough choices and about the limitations of life, and particularly under like capitalism, and how not given a great deal of like other options, how Wendy sort of goes with this house. But it's sort of funny how she then confronts him at the end of the scene and asks how long roughly do you have to live, sort of thing, and he kind of says like a year roughly, and I think it's just that thing of where at the end of the scene you're not sure if Wendy's gonna take it or not, but in the end they do take it. And it's maybe just that thing of, well, it's a year isn't too long, and he's down in the basement, so hopefully we won't come across him too much. And that's another actor I know, by the way. He's been in quite a lot of things, but the thing I know him mostly for is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where he plays like the head of the Watchers Council. But he's very familiar face. I think he's been in a number of things over the years. Good actor. So he plays this old guy who basically they'll be sharing like a house with. So that's Ozark episode 2. Again, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Sort of got little tidbits on the characters, a bit more on the kids this episode, which I appreciated, and some solid story beats. It's not necessarily setting the world on fire, but I can certainly see progression, and I can see potential, and there's small bits of like black humour which I appreciate as well. So I think things are shaping up quite nicely, and I'm sort of intrigued because there's a fair bit of buzz about this show, so I'm hoping it'll continue in this form. But if you've been watching the show, or if you're watching it for the first time, then let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always, and you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/boardnow. Thanks for listening. See you guys again soon.